Today we have the second video in the series ranking my viewers' fish tanks. I'm super excited because today I selected 3 very special tanks that I'm super excited to share with you guys. One of the tanks was sent by Roger from Spain. He has a very specialized Hillstream tank. It's a 180 liter setup and we'll dive into it first. Another tank is a 900 liter, it's a massive monster tank that was sent from Stefan, who is located in Denmark. And it's a natural tank that actually has seasons, so it's super cold during the winter and rather hot during the summer. And last but not least, we have a rather standard 100 liter community tank that was sent by Hudson from Canada, and he keeps guppies and other fish. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So the first tank that we want to review today is Roger's 180 liter planted Hillstream tank. As you can see right away, it's a super interesting scape. It's a very unique style when it comes to just the whole setup of the tank, and I absolutely love it. So shout out to Roger from Barcelona just for the general style of the tank. His setup looks as follows. He has a 180 liter tank. He has an Aquarium Ultramax 2000 filter and a Cheerius B series lighting. So it's quite interesting because he has this Hillstream setup that requires a lot of water flow, right? He wants to mimic, so to say, the natural flow in a river. Because of the species, he has Hillstream Loaches and Gobies and other species that really like that fast flowing water. And we will dive into the species Roger has in a minute. But in order to achieve that, he has this Aquarium Ultramax 2000 filter. And the filter, it has a massive water volume that goes through it per hour. I think it's 2000 liters. Or if you have a 180 liter tank, that's roughly 10 to 12 cycles each hour, which is pretty insane. So it's heavily overfiltered, but it's also part of the reason why this tank is so crystal clear. And you can directly see the fish, the plants, everything looks crystal clear, almost a bit too clean in my opinion. But other than that, it's a rather low-tech setup. So he has, I would say, a rather Asian-themed Hillstream setup that was, according to Roger himself, originally inspired by Rachel O'Leary. Let's maybe first talk about the plants that Roger keeps in his tank. He has tons of cryptocoryne varieties. Actually, I think he only has cryptocorynes. I mean, it's not the same plant species, but it's the same group of plants, let's say, but they look completely different. So if you look on the right-hand side of his tank, he has these giant cryptocorynes, Cryptocoryne balancea, and they almost look like Vallisneria plants or like weeds in my opinion. And what I really like is that he has this massive filter and it directly flows onto those Vallisneria plants, creating this really river-like flow of water. And that's absolutely beautiful. And there's also an animal that hides in these leaves, which we will explain later. Let's continue with the other cryptocoryne plants that he has. So when it comes to smaller mid-ground cryptocorynes, he has Cryptocoryne venti green and Cryptocoryne venti pink flamingo. So as the name indicates or implies already, the pink flamingo ones are the pink ones and the venti green are the green-leafed ones. All in all, I would say cryptocorynes are extremely hardy plants. They do well without any CO2 injection, which for me is always a plus. I like it low cost, low budget, low maintenance. So the cryptocorynes apparently do very well in his tank. And actually, Roger has shared his tank in our community a few months back, and it looked pretty similar. So the plants were not just planted in there like a week ago and just look good for the moment. They are actually there for a rather long time. So I would say super cool plant selection. In my opinion, it could be a little more green, a little more plants in there. But I mean, you can basically tell from the tank in the back here, my 100 species ecosystem tank, that I really like heavily planted tanks, and maybe I overdo it sometimes. He also has an interesting stone setup. He has these skystone hardscape elements. He called them skystone. I don't know if that is a proper word that we have in English or in German rather, but the main thing that make me like these stones is that they are porous. So they have little pores, and those pores help algae to grow. And Roger has tons of bottom dwelling and surface dwelling fish. These little pores in the rocks and little cracks in the rocks help the algae get a foot in the rock, and the fish cannot get all the way down into these pores. And that really helps with maintaining that algae population or that biofilm population stable on those rocks. And it really helps these fish who graze on the surfaces of these rocks to have a constant fresh source of food. And I really like that. First of all, they look great. So design wise, they're really cool. But second of all, they are a great fresh food source for his fish. Speaking of fish, he has tons of super cool fish. That's what I love most about this tank. He has focused on bottom dwelling and Hillstream species. So first of all, obviously in a Hillstream setup, you need Hillstream loaches. So he has some yellowfin Hillstream loaches. Those have a dark body and yellow fins, and they are shy and are biofilm grazers. So you couldn't really see them that often in the video that he sent me. I only have this one rather clear shot of one of those Hillstream loaches. Apart from those Hillstream loaches, he has another kind of loach species, a Panda loach. Those are highly outgoing. Roger said that was probably the best fish choice he had in this tank because they are always grazing, they are always looking for food, they are always there when he's right in front of the tank. And this is something that you must appreciate. As a fish keeper, this is the best, right? When I got a few months back, or half a year back, I got black coolie loaches, and the guys at the fish store said that they are very, very shy fish, and now they are. But in the first 2 months, they were all the time swimming around the tank, and this was the best time for me because I could always observe them. But of course, it's not the natural behavior. That's why they don't do it these days anymore. But it's pretty cool that Roger's Panda loaches are still that active, and it's absolutely lovely. Panda loaches actually need pristine and cool water and high flow in the water. So basically, Roger's tank is perfect for these fish. They are also not too large. He mentioned that the ones that he has are a little bit larger than the normal ones, but they don't get too large. So when it comes to water volume and water flow, this is probably the best species you could get. Then he has neon blue gobies, 2 of them. With that, he also has rainbow gobies. Couldn't get too many good shots of those. Both are absolutely beautiful fish. And gobies in general, I've never kept gobies, but I keep seeing them in a fish store. And something that I've noticed is that there are some gobies that are in saltwater tanks and some gobies that are in freshwater tanks. And then I dug a little deeper and did some research about these gobies. So originally, gobies are saltwater fish. And also, they don't look like any other freshwater fish that I'm aware of, at least. That's why I really think this is pretty cool. So you have a fish that has almost the same shape as its relatives in the saltwater in a freshwater setup, and that really like these fast-flowing waters, which I think is super cool because you rarely have this shape in other freshwater setups. That's the first thing. And another interesting thing that I found out about these gobies is that they actually live pretty well in freshwater, but they give birth to, or they don't give birth to, they lay eggs, and they stick their eggs to little rocks in the rivers and in the streams where they live, in pretty cold streams. And then what happens is that their larvae hatch, and they are dragged by the water flow in those fast flowing rivers into the ocean. And this is where they actually grow up. And this is pretty comparable to, I would say, salmon, just the other way around. It's comparable to zebra nerites. It's comparable to amano shrimp. We have so many species that are requiring this freshwater saltwater switch, often in the aquarium, and gobies are just one of them. So they would probably never reproduce in Roger's tank if he doesn't introduce some saltwater stage into their life cycle. But anyways, super cool bottom dwelling fish and really cool addition to the tank. He also has some fish that live in the midsection of the water, namely some white cloud mountain minnows, which are pretty cool. They are hardy and cold water loving fish, and they just look pretty cool. They, first of all, they look super healthy. They are also well fed, so you can see they have their aquadynamic bodies at the same time. They are pretty fat. So I guess Roger does a good job at feeding his fish, which is probably highly appreciated by them. Roger did not share feeding footage, but they are pretty eager fish, I would say. So they are super active. They always swim, probably also cool down other fish and make them more relaxed in the tank. This is often the case if you have swarmfish, because swarmfish realize when there's a predator and when there's a threat. And they usually, when they are swimming around and don't hide, cools down and relaxes other fish. So this is also pretty cool. And I think they add also well to this whole setup, to this whole flowing or Hillstream setup, I would say. Also cool choice. And then he has also some Goldring Danios. Unfortunately, we couldn't get tons of footage from these Goldring Danios, but they are also fitting into this theme. Something that Roger didn't really focus on in his video were snails that he has. So he does have some, let's say, interspecies issues with his snails. He has some assassin snails. They are also present in my tank here. Don't know if you can see one right now. No, doesn't look like it. Maybe one of them is there, but it's and another one is there. But maybe I can put a video of my assassin snails in here. Assassin snails, as the name indicates, Clea Helena, they are assassinating other snails. That's why they are called assassin snails. They are hunting, and this is the only thing that they do. They kill other snails, and once they run out of snails, they would eat even dead fish or fish that are close to dying. And while he has assassin snails, he also has bladder snails and ramshorn snails in the tank. But I'm sure that Roger is aware that the assassin snails will, over time, eat and prey upon those bladder snails and those pink ramshorn snails. For some reason, in one tank, in this tank, they have eradicated all of my snails. In my other 200-liter South America tank, the ramshorn snails are still there in super high numbers. So there, the assassin snails have not caught up with the ramshorn snail population. In this tank, they have eradicated everything. So I don't really know what's the reason for that, but Roger, you need to be aware of that. But I'm sure you are. That's probably why you got the assassin snails. Maybe when it comes to stocking, the tank might be slightly overstocked. However, and I know I'm saying that while I'm sitting in front of a tank with 100 fish in there, the tank has the following the following fish in there. It has 8 Hillstream Loaches, 6 Panda Loaches, 4 Gobies, 12 White Clouds, 15 Danios, and 7 large shrimp. Right? The shrimp I did not mention yet. He has tons of Amano shrimp in there, so 5 Amano shrimp and 2 bamboo shrimp. And also something that Roger showed in the video footage is that the bamboo shrimp like to stick themselves or attach themselves to those long cryptocorain leaves, and then they open their fangs and catch all of the stuff that floats through the water, which I think is lovely and rather natural for these bamboo shrimp. And also Roger showed his cat, which was also quite lovely. So thanks for that. Anyways, when it comes to stocking, the tank might be slightly overstocked, especially if the animals grow to their full size. However, Roger does tons of water changes. So apart from the heavy filtration that he does weekly water changes, and he does a weekly water change and changes 50% of the water. I think that's a pretty massive effort for a fish tank. And he said even if he's lazy, he would change 70%, 75% of the water every 2 weeks. I would never do that because I would be afraid that my fish would be impacted by the new water coming in. However, Roger mentioned that these fish need that. They need highly oxygenated water, and they are used to this fresh river water. I guess in this case, it's fine. And he didn't mention that any of his fish passed away in the past, and they look extremely healthy. So I guess it's not a problem. However, it's a huge effort. So I will keep that in mind when I give my final rating. And also, I would like to ask Roger, what do you do when you go on vacation? Like, seriously, if you do a bi-weekly water change and you go on a 3 weeks vacation, what happens to the tank? I would be curious to hear. Do you have some friend that come to your house and change the water, or how do you handle that? Because in my case, I do a water change every 3-4 weeks, maybe every 5 weeks. It's easy if you never go on any vacation for that long. But I would really question or be curious to hear how you do that. And now that we have covered all of the species, all of the plant, all of the tech in this tank, I would like to explain the rating methodology again. So we have 0 to 20 points in total, and we have 3 categories that we rate, which I think are very important categories. First category is cost and complexity. If a tank is super expensive and very complex to maintain, then I give it a 0. If it's rather easy, rather cheap, and easy to maintain, I give it a 5, or anything in between if it's somewhere in between. Then we have the next category, which is style and look. This is a rather subjective point of view, I would say. If I don't like the tank, I give it 0 points. If I like it, I give it 5 points. And last but not least, fish and animal well-being. And this is the most important category. If it's not an animal-friendly setup, I will give the tank 0 out of 10 points. If it's an animal-friendly setup, I would give it 10 out of 10 points. And then you get the whole score of 20, or somewhere in between. And now for Roger's tank, I would give it, for cost and complexity, a 3 out of 5. It's definitely not a high-tech tank. That I want to make sure it's definitely not a high-tech tank, but the fact that you have to do a water change, a 50% water change every week, it would just be too much for me, honestly. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just a lot of effort. If I had to do this for this tank every week, it would be like a part-time job, basically. Style and look, 5 out of 5. This is one of the most beautiful tanks I have seen in my life. Like, this is something that I would genuinely want to see in like a gallery, in like an art or tank gallery, or in my living room, just as the centerpiece of attention. It looks absolutely beautiful. So well deserved, 5 out of 5. For animals, I would give it a 8 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10. If you do water changes every week, I would give it a 10 out of 10. But just knowing myself, I know I would not be able to do a water change every week, 50% water change, knowing my own schedule. So for that reason, if you ever don't do water changes, I wonder what happens to the bio load, to nitrate levels. Since the tank is heavily stocked and you don't have as many plants in there, I wonder what would happen. So in order for me to be a 10 out of 10, I would just add more plants. But of course, probably that would reduce that simplistic and minimalistic style. In total, super, super good tank. Super good rating. It's a 16 out of 20. And with that, I think we can go to the next tank. And by the way, the next tank will be an absolute massive monster tank, 900 liters. Wow, pure insanity. But before we go to that, I want to mention a way that you can support me and my work here. So we have two ways to do that, which is the Guppy Gang and the Tetra Gang. You can find the link to both of these here. It's just a QR code. You can scan it or check out the link in the description. It's a monthly support that you give to me and to my channel, and it just helps me with paying for all of the tanks, for all of my equipment, for all of the video editing software, and just is like a small help for me to keep everything running here. You can cancel it every month, and it also gives you some benefits. You get early access to new videos, and you get exclusive community members only posts. But now, without further ado, let's go to the next tank. And as I said, the next tank is absolutely massive. It's Stefan's 900 liter natural pond tank. Stefan is a follower from Denmark. He sent me a super nice video of his tank, and it's a very unique setup. It's a setup that I have personally never seen before, except in a pond, maybe. He has a tank that doesn't have a heater, which is rather rare in our hobby, I would say. So cold water tanks are rather rare thing, but they become more and more popular, I would say. So you have the Medaka rice fish, for instance, that are often common in cold water setups. Also, the Hillstream Loaches are able to survive in cold water setups, or they even thrive in those setups that we mentioned before. But Stefan has done all of that a little differently. He actually got species from Danish waters. I think he was fishing there and got them and put them into the tank. And we will go into the fish in more detail in a minute. But what I wanted to mention, due to this absence of the heater, he has seasons in his tank. So in winter, he mentioned, because it's in his garage or in his workshop area, his 900 liter tank, he has 7 degrees Celsius, which is very close to the freezing point of water. And in summer, he has up to 25 degrees Celsius in his tank. And this is quite interesting because plants usually don't grow anymore at 7 degrees Celsius, and they grow massively at 25 degrees. And fish, they turn down their whole activity when it's cold, these fish at least, during the winter. And this is quite interesting, I think, and something that I wanted to mention here. When it comes to plants, this tank is massively planted. Maybe before we go into the plants, I would like to explain his soil and substrate composition first. So Stefan mentioned in his video that he has a base layer of clay, then he has a sand layer on top of that and gravel on top of that, and on top of that he has a layer of dead leaves. So just some tree leaves he finds in or found in other ponds and also in the nature, I would assume. And this is a very interesting nutrient composition or nutrient layer. It honestly doesn't look visually super appealing. I mean, for me, it does. I really like natural planted tanks, but it's not something that looks like an aquascape per se. But that doesn't matter to me, at least. So that clay layer that he has is quite interesting. It acts as a natural sponge. So that's also what we have in ponds in nature. You have some kind of clay-based soil usually. It acts as this kind of sponge that just soaks up potassium and iron and all of these things that are trickling down from the degradation of these leaves, and we will get to that in a moment. And that's just the first layer of his fertilization, so to say, natural fertilization. He has a 1 to 3 millimeter roughly sand and grain or gravel mix on top of that, and that helps letting the plant roots through and letting nutrients through, but it stops dirt and debris from getting into this gravel layer, and that prevents fouling in the water and rot. And this is also something very beneficial and very professional, actually. He also has a sort of microfauna going on in this tank. So he has mentioned that he has scuds and isopods and also some detritus worms that, if they didn't have this protective layer of gravel and leaf litter, the fish would just eat them straight away. And if they had access to those, but since they have these hiding spots, there's like this food web created in this tank, which is pretty insane and cool, in my opinion. With that, he needs zero chemical fertilizers or CO2 fertilization, and his plants are still growing massively, I would say. When it comes to plants, I think he has stayed rather close to this ecosystem theme, this Danish pond or Danish river ecosystem theme, except for one plant. He has ordinary Vallisneria. The Vallisnerias that I have in here, I think they look pretty similar. He mentioned that it's just ordinary Vallisneria, but if you keep in mind that this is a 900-liter tank, and if you look at the leaf size, I think it's giant Australian Vallisneria. Those are extremely hardy. I've kept them in this tank for almost 2 years now, and these plants grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's the same in Stefan's tank, apparently. However, it doesn't really fit this Danish theme. But I was surprised to see that they survived these cold winter phases. This 7-degree winter phases is something that I would have never expected a tropical plant to survive. So very cool that Stefan tried that and that it's apparently working. He has some other plants in there. He mentioned post pondweed. I couldn't find pictures of that on the internet that look like this plant. That's why I don't want to share the Latin name here, because I'm not 100% sure it's the right species. And he has some crisp leaf pondweed that is apparently even flowering in his tank, which is super cool. And he mentioned that his plants, some of them stop growing during the winter, but some of them keep growing during the winter, which is also pretty cool, or keep staying green and don't rot away at least. And then he has water milfoil. I think it's Eurasian or European water milfoil that he has. He didn't mention it exactly, but this is actually some plants that grows all over Europe. And in one of my previous nature videos where I explored the invasive species in Germany, I showed a whole forest of Eurasian water milfoil in one of the German quarry lakes that is close to my hometown. And I would assume it's the same in Denmark. And if you want, you can check out this video on the top here. And these water milfoil plants, they just add this natural kind of look to the tank. Now, when it comes to livestock, Stefan has a super interesting setup. So I mentioned the scuds and isopods that Stefan keeps. You unfortunately cannot see them in the tank footage because they are probably too small and hiding in the leaf litter. But he has two massive fish species in there. He has golden rod and golden orf in there, which are native fish to Denmark, and they are absolutely monster fish. You cannot really see the size of these fish in this video because the tank is 900 liters. It's almost 1 ton, 1 metric ton of water that we have here. And these fish appear to be small, but they are actually quite massive fish. I just want to take a second to acknowledge how freaking cool that is. He has fish that usually are present in ponds, and they have enough swimming space in this aquarium because it's freaking 900 liters tank. And he has them in a natural food web aquarium in his garage. How cool is that? Like an absolute dream in my side. He mentioned in his video that these fish sometimes graze on the plants, which is cool because the plant population seems rather stable, to be honest, but still here and there they occasionally snack off these plants. And actually, something that he didn't mention in the video is whether he puts any external pond flakes or something into his tank. That's what I would be curious to hear, because he mentioned that there's a natural food web going on, but I would be curious if that's the only thing he feeds them. If that's the case, that would be even cooler. But I would assume, since it's such large fish and they are still growing also, there's a absolutely gorgeous symbiotic cycle going on. Stefan mentioned that he adds these leaves. Stefan also mentioned that he added some wood that he found in a local forest, which I frequently also do in my tanks, so I really love it. Also very budget friendly. But first, he put that wood into his pond, so it's infested with biofilm, with microorganisms, all kinds of stuff. And then he added it to the tank to create this base layer of the natural food web. Absolutely cool, absolutely lovely. He also frequently adds leaves to the tank, and this creates this natural food web that feeds the scuds, the isopods, and his detritus worms, and those in turn feed the golden orf and the golden rod. So absolutely cool tank, absolutely dream project, I would say, and super cool. One thing that I want to address is the size of the golden orf, though. Golden orf get super large. So the ones that you see in this tank, they are maybe this size at the moment, but golden orf grow up to 40 centimeters. These are fish that typically grow in rivers and in local ponds. And this is just too large for that tank. But Stefan is well aware of that. He said that he just uses this 900 liter tank as a grow out tank, and he will add the golden orf to his pond later, which I would assume has thousands of liters of water volume. So that's fine. And the golden rod, I would say it's smaller. It only gets 20 to 30 centimeters large, but it's still massive fish for any kind of tank setup. So I would take the size of fish with a grain of salt, actually. Now let's get to the score that we have for Stefan's tank. Cost and complexity, I would give it a 4 out of 5. It cannot be a 5 out of 5 because this tank is probably extremely expensive. Like just buying the tank as 900 liter tank is north of 1,000 euros or 1,500 US dollars if you are from the US. So that is probably extremely costly. Still, I don't give it a 5 out of 5 because Stefan mentioned, compared to Roger's tank, he does a water change every half year, so every 6 months only. And this is pretty amazing. The fish look super healthy, the plants look super healthy, the water looks rather clear. And this is due to his heavily planted tank and his deep substrate. And how cool is that? You can just leave the tank for weeks probably without feeding the fish, and nothing will happen. They would just live their life and be super fine. So 4 out of 5 for costs and complexity, because it's really super uncomplex once it's set up, but rather costly. Style and look, I would give it a 3 to 4 out of 5, maybe 4 out of 5. I personally really like it, but I know that many people would be a little unhappy with that rather natural and dirted look. I mean, it's supposed to look like this, I know, but it doesn't really look like a polished tank at all. Animal well-being, I would give it a 9 out of 10. This tank is as close to nature as you can get probably with any kind of aquarium, but I have to address the golden orph in the room. These fish just get too large. So you have to get these fish out before they turn 40 centimeters large. Otherwise, this is just painful for these animals. It's like more or less like a fish bowl in the end when you compare it to the size. However, Stefan is well aware of that. He will do that. He just uses it as a grower tank. That's why I would give it a 9 out of 10 for animal well-being, as long as the golden orph are small. And then we have a total score of 17 out of 20 for this massive 900 liter planted tank. The next tank that we want to have a look at is Hudson's tank. And before we have a look at it, I want you guys to see the rest of his fish room. I hope it's fine that I share this with you guys. But before we dive into Hudson's 100 liter tank, just look at these other tanks with the angelfish and everything. Super, super cool fish room. Absolute dream. And the tanks look super clean and crystal clear, actually. The last tank today, last but not least, is Hudson's 100 liter mixed community tank. It's a rather stand-up setup. If we compare to the other two, I think this is what you would typically have when you set up one of your first tanks. It's a cool, standard, average size tank. I think every one of us can appreciate its simplicity, but still it looks rather clean and rather nicely planted. He has tons of Anubias. He has Anubias batterinana, as far as I can tell. He also has larger Anubia species. Unfortunately, Hudson did not mention the species of plants that he keeps. That's why I have to guess. Looks like he has some Limnophilia plants as well and some other stem plants. And all in all, it looks nicely planted. And it honestly also looks like it was just newly set up, like a tank that was maybe set up like 1, 2, 3 weeks ago, because the plants have slightly grown in, but it still looks rather new and fresh and crystal clear, even clearer and cleaner than Roger's tank that we had a look at a few minutes ago. He keeps tons of fish. He keeps a red lizard whiptail catfish, rather cool looking fish here. I also kept them like 15 years ago, I think. He has Amano shrimp and this is only temporarily, he has some albino bristlenose plecos and also albino guppies. And I'm not the biggest fan of albino fish because for me they look rather unnatural, but I think it's cool that he has this albino theme going on in here. So especially if you look at the plecos and the guppies together when they eat, for instance, or when they are fed, looks quite interesting. It looks like a little bit alien to me, and they look completely different if you compare it to my endless guppies, endless life bearers and guppy fish population back here. That looks rather natural. This is quite an an interesting style of guppy fish. I want to know what you guys think about those guppy fish and about those albino plecos. In nature, we often have albinos in all kinds of animals. Naturally, they have lower chances of survival because they are easier to see for predators, for instance. And often albinos grow in caves, for instance. So we have tons of cave fish that are albinos, for instance. This Gitchak Nakana loach that I've presented on my channel a few months ago, that lives in groundwater only. But for these fish in nature, if they live during the day, they would be super easy for predators to catch. And that's why usually you don't have albinos in nature. That's why it's not the most natural kind of fish, I would say. The fish in Hudson's tank look actually super fit, super healthy, and rather strong, I would say. I would say there's nothing within the species that could lead to any conflicts. He has I would say, perfect niche separation in his tank. So the guppies, they occur the upper layer of the water and the mid layer of the water, while the whiptail, the loaches, and the shrimp, they graze on the surface and eat biofilm mainly. So I would say perfect separation of species. There's no species competing with each other, no species preying upon the other. So when it comes to that, it's a very friendly community style setup. The loaches, the Hillstream loaches and the Amano shrimp, they form a perfect cleanup crew, I would say, which partly explains why this tank is so clean and crystal clear, I would assume. And I would say that's all totally fine for a 100-liter water volume. However, what I would ask Hudson to look out for is this bristlenose pleco. The bristlenose plecos, they are young at the moment, but they are notorious waste producers. So bristlenose plecos, they are known for one thing: they eat and they poop, and they do that a lot. At this current stage and size, they are rather juvenile ones, and he even mentioned in the video that he uses this tank to grow them, to grow the bristlenose fries. It's fine, but if they ever grow to the full size, you shouldn't keep more than like 1 or 2 of them in a 100-liter tank setup. And they also frequently reproduce, so this could also be something that you have to have an eye on. Now that we have looked at all of the species and plants in Hudson's tank, I also want to give a final score to his tank. Cost and complexity. He didn't mention his tech setup or his filtration, but I would say it's an ultimate budget-friendly setup. I would give it a 5 out of 5 for cost and complexity. It doesn't look overly complex. It doesn't look overly technically complicated and also not very costly. So 5 out of 5 in my opinion. Style and look, I would give it a 2 or 3 out of 5. And that's just because personally, I think it's a little too clean of a setup and the plants not need to grow in. I think the fish should have some more hiding space just because it makes it more interesting for the fish and also more interesting for the viewer. And for me, it looks a little too polished and too perfect. Maybe he has just cleaned the tank, but for me, I like it a little more natural, a little more rough, a little more like the 900-liter tank that we had seen in the previous video. Animal well-being, I would give it a 7 out of 10. It's a very peaceful, low-stress environment for the fish that he keeps, but the growing pleco fry are ticking time bombs. So similar to the 900-liter tank and the golden ruff that we discussed before, these plecos will outgrow the tank and you shouldn't keep more than 1 or 2 of them in there. But other than that, I think it's a very animal-friendly setup, very perfect setup. And since he mentioned that he only added the fry to grow them out, I guess Hudson would be aware of that. I also want to mention that he has a fish channel on his own, so please feel free to check that out in the description of the video. So all in all, I would give Hudson a total score of 15 out of 20. And with that, we can come to the final ranking and summary. Hudson's mixed community tank gets 15 out of 20 points, and with that is ranked 3. But still, this is an extremely good score, a very cool tank, and just mainly because of my personal preferences, I put it on rank 3. Rogers 180 liters Hillstream Aquarium is such a cool tank. It's one of the most beautiful setups I've ever seen in my life. It gets a total of 16 out of 20 points just because it's an amazing tank, super good rating. And then the first rank on today's video is Stefan's 900-liter natural native pond tank. What a freaking cool tank. 17 out of 20 points. It's a monster, and it is a well-deserved first rank. How cool is that? Like that would be one of my dreams, to one day have such a big tank, or maybe even a pond where we can have cameras set up in the pond and just film the natural behavior of the fish. I want to know what you guys think about my assessment of these tanks. What do you think? Please put it in the comments below. I will also link Hudson, Roger, and Stefan in this video. So hopefully they will be notified when the video goes live, and maybe they can even discuss and answer if you have questions to their tanks. I would highly appreciate if you guys could just comment and tell me which tank you like, which tank you don't like, which species you like, which information you found very interesting. And if you want to submit your own tank, you can do so very easily. I will put a link to a form below where you can tell me your name and send a picture of your tank and give me some information about the species that you're keeping, because I want to do this every maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now on. I want to review some of your tanks because I think for me this is an extremely interesting format. I hope it's also interesting for you, because I'm learning a lot, and I guess you guys are learning a lot of interesting species and facts and also aquarium setups as well. If you want to submit your tank, please feel free to fill out the type form below or also here. And Again, I want to mention a big thank you to all of my channel members. Guys, this is the biggest support that you could give to this channel, apart from sending you videos, is just giving this monthly financial support. You can quit it at any time. As mentioned before in the video, you can scan this QR code here and join the Guppy Gang or the Tetra Gang. You get early access to new videos and you get members only posts. It takes 2 minutes to do that, and it's the biggest help that you could give to me, because I have tons of costs here to run this channel, and this just helps, and you can cancel it at any time. If you like this video, I'm sure you would enjoy watching this video where I show how this tank did after 1.5 years, the Jewel Rio 240 tank, or this video where I show the first video in the series ranking my followers' fish tanks, where we have a nightmare bowl that is super animal unfriendly. We have a monster guppy tank with more than 500 liters actually, and another very cool tank.